Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to this new edition of the webinar series that we organize here at EU Disinfo regularly every Thursday. So we're going to give just a few more seconds for people to join. And I guess that while we do that, I can briefly tell you a bit about who we are. EU Disinfo is a non-profit organization gathering knowledge and expertise on disinformation in Europe and beyond. One of the reasons we organize these webinars, and we've been already running them for over 2 years, is to give voice to the experts in our community, to share knowledge, and to raise awareness about the excellent work being done. So basically, we believe that connecting people and perspectives is essential if we want to respond effectively to disinformation. That's why we also organize our annual conference. Last year in Ljubljana, it was attended by over 600 participants. This year will take place in Vilnius, in Lithuania, between the 6th and the 8th of October 2026. It's such a big event that the call for proposals is now open, and I must recognize that I gave it a quick look this morning, and we already have received already a strong wave of high quality submissions covering really critical developments and underexplored issues that require, I'd say, greater attention across the disinformation ecosystem. So as you see, Disinfo 2026 preparations are fully underway, and you still have time until the end of February, I think, to submit ideas for topics you would like to see discussed, including on climate change. Climate change disinformation, as it continues to be a critical and fast-moving area that must remain high on the policy and public radar. Which brings me back to today's session. I can see that the number of participants is growing, so welcome everyone, and thank you for being here today. My name is Ana Romero. I am community coordinator at EU Disinfo Lab. I'm also a climate counter disinformation expert, and I will be your moderator today. We have almost 1 hour ahead for us to explore how the EU is countering climate disinformation. The title of today's webinar is Scroll, Stop, Verify, how the EU is bringing climate facts forward. Before starting, just a few quick technical notes to make sure everything runs smoothly. We will not be using the Zoom chat. The Zoom chat is closed for questions or for any interaction today. Instead, we will be using Slido. You can access to Slido. Maria, you can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So you can go to Slido by scanning the QR code you see on the screen with your phone, or you can go to slido.com in your browser and enter the code #disinfo. So I would encourage you to start logging, because in a moment I'll ask you a couple of questions so we get to know each other a bit better. By the way, just to let you know that Slido will be open during the whole session, so you can submit comments or any questions at any time, and I'll come back to that after the presentations during the Q&A. Also, this webinar, so you know, it's being recorded. It will be available tomorrow on our website, on our YouTube channel, the Climate Clarity Hub, and it will also be featured on DigiClima platforms. Important for you to know, there is live translation available. So to activate it, click on the CC button at the bottom left. That's it, as you see on your screen. And then you just have to enable the translation option and select just the language that you prefer. So let's start with 2 quick polls via Slido. I encourage you to just answer right away. Where are you joining us from today? We are always very curious to see how diverse an international audience is. We have people from Brussels. I have some neighbors from here, from Madrid, Vilnius, Helsinki, Sweden, from Italy, Lisbon, Berlin, Geneva. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for being here. This is very much appreciated. Let's go to the second question. Which sector do you represent? Let's see. All right, so you can see it yourself, a large amount coming from NGO civil society. We have new institutions, business, a little bit of media and academia. Thank you again. So let's start now. Disinformation remains a major challenge for Europe. A large majority of citizens report being frequently exposed to it, and especially younger audience encounter misleading content on a weekly basis. When it comes to climate change, this becomes even more critical. I'd say climate disinformation not only distorts public understanding, but also delay policy action. It polarizes debate and weaken trust in institutions, in science, at a time when informed decision making is more important than ever. So today's webinar focuses on how European institutions and civil society actors are responding and how strategic communications can help bring verified climate facts forward in an increasingly noisy digital environment. We are delighted to have two excellent speakers with us. First, Herry, Information and Communication Officer at the European Commission's Directorate-general for Climate Action. Jeremy focuses on addressing climate disinformation as part of his work at DG Clima, and today he will introduce the European Commission's newly launched campaign, Climate Facts Matter. Following him, we will hear from Stephanie Hankey, co-founder and co-executive director of Tactical Tech. Stephanie has developed, among many other things, the RePlaybook, a field guide to the climate and information crisis. So without further ado, let's begin. Jeremy, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much for having me today, and I appreciate the opportunity to share this pilot campaign that we've just launched to address climate disinformation in the EU. And before diving into that in more detail, first I wanted to share a little poll to sort of get an idea of what's your opinion so in your opinion, what percentage of Europeans agree that climate change is caused by human activity? Is it 23%, 69%, 84%, or 91%? You can vote on Slido, and I'd be curious to see what you think the result is. So just going to wait for a second there give people time to answer. But don't be shy. So okay.
Jeremy, I don't know maybe we're having some technical issues, but let's
Okay.
try.
Is that the case? All right. Well, you know what? It's okay. Well, this one's working apparently. So anyway, what percentage of Europeans, in your opinion, find it difficult to differentiate between reliable information and disinformation about climate change on social media? Is it 49%, 67%, 31%, or 12%? I see the moment 49% is the highest in the polls, followed by 67, quite closely, which is gaining ground, and then 31. Nobody thinks it's 12%, which some people think it's 12%. Okay, well, that's interesting. Interesting to see. The correct number is 49%. So 49% of Europeans find it difficult to differentiate between reliable information and disinformation about climate change on social media. That is a number we found in a Eurobarometer poll we recently conducted. So now I think I'm going to move on to my presentation and share my screen with you. Just 1 second, please. Sorry. Sorry, just 1 second. Sharing sound. And there we go. I believe you can see my screen. Yes, as I was saying earlier, yes, so 49% of Europeans find it difficult to differentiate, to identify reliable information on climate change on social media. 52% say traditional media in their country doesn't provide clear information on climate change. Um, and that that goes to show that there is a problem and that there's a fertile ground for disinformation to spread and for people to both be deceived into believing false information, but also just to be confused and not know what kind of information they can trust anymore. On the plus side, 84% of Europeans agree that climate change is caused by human activity. 14% disagree, 2% don't know. And 85% view climate change as a serious problem, but still, this context shows that there's reason to take action and to help strengthen societal resilience against climate disinformation. So we've launched a campaign called Climate Facts Matter to address this issue, and we structured the campaign around 3 pillars: be aware, be prepared, and be informed. By be aware, we mean be aware of climate disinformation, why it's a problem, how it works. Be prepared, the pillar in which we give some tips and tricks on how to deal with it from a media literacy perspective and how to critically consume media to be prepared to face climate disinformation, and then be informed, and be informed of the facts on topics that are subject to disinformation. And so with this campaign, instead of a traditional myth-busting campaign, we wanted to instead focus on, as I was saying, strengthen societal resilience. So giving people the tools to be able to tell disinformation, accurate information for themselves. In terms of the audiences, we are trying to reach a group we call climate bystanders, and by that we mean people who are neither deniers of climate change nor activists. So they people who recognize climate change exists, but could still it's not their main topic of interest. They could be vulnerable to climate disinformation, and we believe there's a potential to strengthen their tools in recognizing and dealing with climate disinformation. And in terms of an age group, 30 to 40 years old, which was informed by the previous Eurobarometers, where we looked at the people's understanding or agreement with the fact that climate change is caused by human is serious or not. And then this is a pilot campaign. It's the first campaign of this type that we've launched. And so for this pilot campaign, we've focused on Finland, France, Italy, and Poland to try and get a geographic kind of spread across Europe and diversity of populations. So that's the focus, but on our owned channels, we through sharing with the EU representations in the member states. We're sharing with it's shared across the EU. And so now I'd like to share some campaign material. So we have developed quite a wide variety of material that we're sharing via advertising on YouTube, on Twitch, also posting on our own social media channels. And we've got posters outside, digital billboards. We're working with influencers, and we have media partnerships. So I'm going to show you a little bit of all of that. First, here's our campaign video, which I'm going to play now.
We hear a lot about climate change, but it's not always easy to know what you can trust. Disinformation clouds the facts, spreads doubt, and turns us against each other instead of against climate change. Be aware, be prepared, be informed.
Right, so we've got several videos.
We hear a lot about climate.
Several videos that we've prepared, and here these are screenshots. There are videos of different lengths. There's some just some general more. I would say we keep it to keep people's attention. We're using short formats and trying to share easy to remember sort of tips and tricks, which one of example that you can see here. Here's another short video. And this on the left is a poster that we're using in Finland at the moment. And on the right, another video. So we've got these 5 tips on how to spot climate disinformation. This is tip number 3.
Disinformation likes loaded language. If a post is making you angry or scared, pause and verify the claims. Be aware, be prepared, be informed.
Right. This is what you're seeing now, screenshots from a media partnership that we have with Brut, a French media, in which they posted on their Instagram channel a sort of a carousel explainer on climate disinformation in the context more specifically related to France, helping us reach wider audiences through their channels as well. And here's some screenshots from some influencers we're working with. One great advantage of working with social media influencers is we reach people that we otherwise wouldn't, simply because it's a different messenger. Although, of course, these are all how can I say public partnerships, as in they all state that this is a partnership with the European Commission. The one on the left is an Italian influencer called Elisa Altamura, who shows the analogy of gossip to explain how, if you hear gossip, you should always check, sort of ask about the source. When did this happen? Where did that happen? And so on. Trying to use that analogy to use a different way of trying to get people to improve their media consumption habits. And also, just wanted to share we have our campaign webpage rather. You can see the URL there, in which we share broadly our approach to addressing climate disinformation, these 5 tips that I mentioned, and the resources. We've also prepared some content a toolkit for people and organizations who'd like to spread the word further. There are ready-to-use materials. It's a handbook on how to spot climate disinformation that was developed in partnership with Edmo, and editable social media posts and videos. It's also an infographic that we prepared that you can see here, which you can also find in the link on our website. And now just wanted to take a minute to share what we're doing beyond the campaign. So in January, the European Union endorsed the Declaration on Information Integrity on Climate Change that was launched during COP30. Also wanted to say a word about the European Climate Pact, which is an initiative that was launched at the same time as the European Green Deal, and it's a community, a network of people and organizations around Europe who commit to taking action to helping spread the word and about climate action, and taking action to pursue the goal of climate neutrality by 2050. And within the European Climate Pact, we've developed a handbook on how to talk to people about climate change. That's worth looking into as well. And then finally, you can see some screenshots there of a series that we've developed in collaboration with DG Energy on it's called 5 Things You Should Know, and we focus on different topics that are subject to disinformation, spreading just 5 key facts about them on well, for instance, as you can see, electric cars, extreme weather, and carbon pricing. So that's it from me now. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope you like the campaign. I hope you see the campaign, and be curious to hear your thoughts if you do. And I'll now pass the floor to Stephanie Hankey from Tactical Tech. Thank you.
Thanks. Hi. So let me just see if I can get my presentation going before I launch in. Hold on one second. Hopefully. Let's get that thing. Hopefully that's good. So thank you. I'm Stephanie Hankey, a co-founder and co-director of Tactical Tech, as Anna introduced me at the beginning. And following Jeremy talking, I mean, that was one good example of what's being done in terms of responses. But I'm going to be talking about looking at some of the trends and also some of the responses through a project that we have been developing called the RePlaybook. So I'm just going to jump in. So our organization, Tactical Tech, we're based in Berlin, but we work globally, and we work a lot in Europe, scaling critical digital literacy initiatives, which means working with the public on different issues around critical thinking and technology, but also working with decision makers. And the project which I'm going to be talking about today is called the RePlaybook, and we just launched it at the end of last year, and it's an overview of 30 different leading organizations and individuals working on this sort of overlap, as we call it, between the climate and the information crisis. And in that, we're looking at what can be done, what are the responses that can be used. The idea of the RePlaybook was really to there is growing consensus and awareness, as Jeremy said, about issues of climate misinformation and disinformation. Some of it's not new, some of it is new. It's constantly changing. But there's less known about what to do in response, or less consensus on what to do in response. So we really wanted to bring together different points of view and different insights. So I'm going to be talking about that today. And just to kind of go back to the basics, because there's a variety of people on the call. What do we mean by climate mis and disinformation? I think in the context of the RePlaybook, we're thinking about it both as information that is either intentionally false about climate change, or even information that may be even accidentally false. It may be people expressing their opinion, but it's maybe not well informed, or maybe they're sharing something that isn't accurate. So it can also be unintentional, let's say. And also bottom up and top down, meaning that some climate misinformation is just spreading between people and is generated by individuals, and others is, other information is generated by different kinds of actors who may benefit from confusing the public about climate change. So I think we're talking about all those different kinds of misinformation. And then lots of people talking about this say, what's different about this? We've always had confusion or misinformation around climate for many, many years. What's different about what's happening now? And that's what often people refer to this as the 5 Vs. In the context of the digital world, there's just so much more of it. It spreads very quickly. It comes up in many formats and in many ways. And then also people share it widely. And so it makes it different from perhaps what might have come before, and therefore difficult to cope with, and it's changing constantly. One thing that's very important is on this volume question is repetition as well. People see the same posts over and over again, and the more you hear something, the more you start to either believe it or get confused by it. So that's a very important factor, which makes it also hard to respond to. Why? So what? In a way, I mean, that's kind of one of the questions we've been asking as well in the work running up to the RePlaybook is, does everybody need the facts? Is it just about getting more information out there? If we all had access to the correct information, there would still be a lot of probably confusion and concern over climate change. So it's not like it's just an information issue, meaning information deficit issue. But there's many other parts of this as well, including the fact that if we don't have a shared reality about what's happening, we just can't make decisions as communities and societies, which makes it what we're calling a keystone issue, which means it affects all other parts of decision making around climate. So it's no longer kind of just an issue for people talking about climate narratives or climate comms. It's becoming an issue for all climate groups, and also entities, including companies, trying to make progress on these issues. It's also important because it affects how people form opinions and how they behave, consume, invest, and ultimately vote, which is also why the issue is becoming more politicized. And also it impacts this, more importantly, perhaps the solutions we support, and to some extent public safety in the case of things like extreme weather events, which I'll come to in a minute. So that's why it kind of has to be fixed. And these are the kinds of things that we've all seen all over the media the last few years, which means that it's becoming just a much more politicized issue and kind of wrapped up in divided discourse. So in terms of what can be done, this is the kind of golden question, I guess. Hopefully, you're with me so far, but many people just want to look at solutions. And we, in the RePlaybook, we have 3 parts to it. One is looking at investigating and understanding trends. As the campaign said, that Jeremy outlined, being aware is the first thing. So like understanding what's happening, being able to track what's happening, figuring out who's doing it, where, why, when, and what, and so on, is a really important part of response. So that's the first part of the RePlaybook. The second part is more about understanding and responding to the role of technology within that. So what kinds of problems does technology bring to the table that are quite unique, like generative AI, for example, and I'll show you an example of that in a minute. And then the third part is how to counteract this divided discourse. So what can be done, not just climate comms like broadcasting narratives, let's say, or issues around climate, but actually trying to get people talking across divides, trying to understand, get people to have a common ground about what's happening and why, and help them resolve these discussions and debates openly rather than in a divided way that sort of gets swept up in other issues. Those are the 3 parts of the RePlaybook, divided like that. So I'm going to show some different trends and solutions, just as examples from what's in the book. So some of the tactics in there look at extreme weather events, and this is a kind of trend, something that's become more and more clear. And this video is showing somebody's video taken from an airplane of a wildfire. And the reason why there's so much more concern over extreme weather events and sort of more discussion and debate is because it's also just much more prevalent, and we have a lot of media that we create as well about these events. Normally this kind of image would be taken perhaps only by a media organization and it would be circulated, but now obviously it's just everyday people, and that's making it already quite confusing about what it is that people are seeing, and creating a lot of spaces in which there's discussion and debate. And this is just one example of what happens when there's an extreme weather event, and then there becomes like a swirl of discussion at the sort of ground level or grassroots level amongst people while they try to figure out what's happened and actually help each other with those issues. and how they quickly spiral, and you'll have seen some of these yourself, into issues which are then turned into speculations or conspiracies, and where there becomes more and more false information, and that kind of spirals very, very quickly. One of the things that's particularly important about that is in the context of generative AI, people don't know anymore which images are real and which are not. And images and videos are a super important part of understanding what's happening around us. And seeing it from someone else, obviously, is something that would encourage you to kind of act. And the things that are happening are also quite unbelievable. You know, the image there, this is an example from the playbook from a group called Maldita, and you know, images there of floods in Valencia are showing cars stacked up. You can see it there on the side. People believe that was an AI image, because also AI images are quite confusing and kind of otherworldly, and so it's very hard for us to distinguish now, even if we are aware of what's what. And lastly, in terms of the sort of trend thing around extreme weather events, it's particularly a problem when the platforms themselves are amplifying the problem. Here's another example from the RePlaybook, from the work of Centre for Countering Digital Hate. They did research to show that this is in America, but I think it's indicative and perhaps something to think about in the European context as well. But they did the research in America showing how the reach of both the newspapers, as you can see the news sources there, and the emergency response was not anywhere near, even if you add it all up, equal to the reach of Alex Jones, which is a online influencer. So, you know, the source and the reach of the source is a very important factor as well, and makes it, in terms of that question of volume and repetitiveness, it makes it a very complicated thing to try and tackle. So in response, in the RePlaybook, I'm not going to go into any of these in detail. I'm just going to highlight a couple that you might want to look at. There's one here looking at the way in which pre-bunking, as it's called, meaning getting ahead of an issue and talking about it in advance, can be particularly useful. And I think there's some consensus that this can be useful specifically in the context of extreme weather events, where you know, for example, there's going to be a fire season, or where you know there's going to be maybe floods, to be able to get ahead of the discussion with the public in advance. And in this case, At Climate Legs talks about how to do that. The second example is different. It's looking at this is one by Factiverse, using a tool to use AI to find ways to understand where misinformation is coming up around climate extreme weather events, and being able to track that, and therefore authorities being able to know, including local councils and so on, what's happening, and to be able to get ahead of that conversation, maybe through other mediums like radio and other things. And then the third one is from Media Matters and EcoTalk, looking at how to use things like TikTok algorithms, both to understand what happens during an extreme weather event, like some of those examples I gave you, but also how to use it to give people advice about what to do, and also to try to let's say, improve information sharing and the quality of information being shared. The second trend and set of solutions which I wanted to highlight is kind of looking more at the solution space. So that one was more climate resilience and extreme weather. The second trend is more around confusion around what to do about climate change, what solutions are viable and what work, and so on, and the role of companies in that. Perhaps one that people might be more familiar with is false advertising. This is an overview actually from the work of CAD, looking at doing a sort of research on the amount that was spent by different kinds of fossil fuel companies on advertising through social media. So as you can see on Meta, a very large amount. So just gives you a sense of the volume of advertising coming from fossil fuel companies on social media. That report's got obviously a lot more information about the quality of those advertisements. This example is looking at the ways in which, in this case, the plastics industry are getting into influencer streams and influencers talking about plastic recycling in a positive way. In this case, so it says they're sponsored by Positively PET, as you can see, but sort of showing up in everyday streams and feeds. For example, this person talking about taking their dogs for a walk in the park and feeding them water from a plastic bottle, but finding ways that the that different kinds of industries are not just using advertising, but new forms of influence, which shows up in people's content streams as original content from not from companies, but from content creators. And then perhaps even a bit more unusual, but fake accounts. So people, in this case, people supporting, in this case, a oil pipeline, but the people who were supporting and leaving comments and so on were not even real people. So it becomes this very confusing space today in which to try to differentiate these things. And I'm using examples from all over the world for different reasons, not to show that this isn't just a European problem, but also not to focus specifically on examples that you might know, but maybe ones you haven't heard of before. So in terms of the responses, there is in the RePlaybook, there's different kinds of ways of thinking about this. One from Guy Porter from Global Witness is looking at how to kind of track disinformation supply chain. So how to kind of reverse engineer where these things are coming from and how they work, and giving tips and techniques on how to do that. Influence Map is looking more at how can you track and expose narratives, like tried and tested narratives that we know or that researchers know are definitely used repeatedly in the industry. So how can, in this case, you can see probably in the little infographics of solution skepticism, policy neutrality, and affordability and energy security. So how can you kind of look at an argument and know, oh, this is a typical argument? How can you kind of understand that in different ways? And then lastly, this example from Maldita, looking at how generative AI is changing the way that people understand climate, the climate crisis, and climate issues, both from the point of view of, maybe using a chatbot to get questions and answers. And there's a question about where those chatbots are trained and what kind of information they're trained on and what kind of bias they're repeating, but also looking at how the very top result on a search engine, the sort of like little paragraph you get, how those are also starting to influence people's thinking about climate because they're no longer looking at other sources. So that's raising all kinds of new issues. I think my 15 minutes is up. As you can see, there's plenty of content in the RePlaybook. There's, like I said, there's contributions from 30 different organizations. They are NGOs, journalists, technologists, researchers, also from the corporate sector, from creative industries, people working with companies who are trying to get ahead of climate sustainability issues. So it's a very broad cross-sectoral overview of different kinds of solutions and techniques that are being used. And yeah, please, you can download it for free here. It's quite a big book, as you can see by the image. So you can download it for free, the QR code's there. But if you want a print copy, we also have them, and you can send a request for one. The print copy is quite handy because you can sort of dip through it more easily, because it's a very comprehensive overview of what's happening. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeremy and Stephanie, for unpacking institutional responses and campaign strategies, as well as broader structural challenges around climate disinformation and digital technologies. We are now around 20 minutes ahead for us for the Q&A session, and I'm very happy to see that we already have a good number of questions from different categories. They are coming through Slido. Thank you so much for being engaged. Just a quick reminder, if you would like to ask a question or leave a comment, please do so via Slido. So you just have to scan the QR code that you see on the displayed on the screen, or go to slido.com in your browser and enter the code #disinfo. Allow me to start with one question, Jeremy. What was the main strategic gap that led to the creation of Climate Facts Matter? What wasn't working before?
Sure. Well, I'd say that this was the very first time that we did a relatively large-scale communication campaign on climate disinformation. In terms of what wasn't working before, I'd say maybe at some point in the past, we weren't addressing disinformation as much, simply, and also, we weren't as probably weren't as aware as we are now of the important difference between pre-bunking and debunking, and how it's have to be cautious with the way you debunk if you don't want to inadvertently advertise false narratives. Yes, that's what I'd say.
Okay, so let's continue in this line. I saw this question, I'm going to highlight it. Pre-bunking requires anticipating narratives before they spread. How does DigiClim identify emerging climate disinformation trends early enough to respond effectively?
Yes, indeed. So I would say we have we have research in-house, and we also are very happy to be able to read the expertise from various organizations and research institutes on the climate disinformation trends. Perhaps in the way I'm using pre-bunking is not necessarily on a let's say before they spread. I don't know what threshold that would be, but we're certainly trying to avoid debunking in the sense that, for instance, we if there was a very a false and very harmful narrative on, I don't know, let's say for instance electric vehicles, which is a topic where there's a lot of this information, then we wouldn't try to say this narrative is false, because that would just bring so much attention to that narrative that instead we're going to focus on spreading the facts on, let's say, for instance, we'll say, well, electric vehicles are just as safe as other conventional vehicles. And in that sense, the trying to prevent the spread of that of these harmful narratives, but in terms of anticipating them, well, as I was saying, based on our research, but also expert research from outside, and but even though some has already spread, let's say, I think it's still important to try and set the facts straight in that manner.
Okay, so in this line of strategy of pre-bunking, so there is this question saying that the pre-bunking, the campaign is based on pre-bunking. How do you measure whether pre-bunking actually changed behavior, not just awareness? Stephanie, you can jump in if you want as well.
Well, I mean, on our side, I can say on the Climate Facts Matter campaign, after the campaign is over, we're going to have a survey to try to assess its effectiveness and what people took from it. But then also, I would say on a wider scale. Not just, I mean, the numbers I shared at the very beginning of the presentation on the share of people in the EU who find it difficult to differentiate between disinformation and accurate information. In the long term, we would, of course, our ambition is for people to be able to, well, to be able to clearly differentiate accurate and inaccurate information. And that would be a measure of long-term success.
I can jump in maybe as well. I think, because I did mention pre-bunking as one of the examples, I think one of the interesting things looking at all these different responses and solutions, so as I said, there are 30 in the RePlaybook. I didn't mention many of them, which are more systemic policy, for example, interventions. So some of them I would say are more about looking at the symptoms, and some are looking at the core root of the problem and looking at a systems kind of approach. So there's quite a variety in the RePlaybook, but I wanted to show some of the more let's say close to hand ones today, because there's a variety of people on the call. Some of the policy ones are important, but obviously out of the reach of many people. But about pre-bunking specifically, one of the interesting things that came out of the work is that many of the tactics that have been tried do work in very specific contexts. And I think the problem is we tend to think that there's going to be one answer and that's going to work for everything. And obviously that's not been the case. And I think what we need to get better at is knowing which specific thing to use in which specific context with what kind of outcome. So the reason I used pre-bunking as an example in this specific section on extreme weather events is in the context of, for example, fire season or seasons where it's known there's going to be problems with urban heat islands and so on, then it's a good idea maybe to try and do something in that very contained context in that very specific location. But as a general blanket approach to solving the problem globally, it's not going to happen. So I think it's the question of what we're asking of these tactics and what we're realistically setting them up for in terms of setting them up for success. And I think you could say that for many of the examples in the RePlaybook, that even fact checking, which has been proven, not to solve the problem, but it's super important in the context of holding corporations to account, to actually hold them to their word in terms of the reliability of the information that they're sharing to their investors and to stakeholders. So I think each technique has a very important possible role depending on the context you're using it in.
Definitely, thank you. A question on AI and synthetic context, we couldn't miss that. How concerned is the Commission about synthetic climate disinformation specifically? Is the EU preparing for a scenario where AI-generated climate disinformation becomes indistinguishable from authentic content?
Yes, well, this generative AI in particular has become quite a problem in terms of climate disinformation. And in fact, as part of the campaign, as part of the Be Prepared pillar, we have a component focusing on identifying AI generated content into how explaining to people how this works and why it's we need to be wary of it. And it's actually there's recently I saw this there was a scientist. So this was a nutritional scientist, not a climate scientist, but who's someone had created an AI avatar of him and made videos on YouTube saying, using his voice and his face, making him say things that were inaccurate. And so this is something like a totally picture happening to climate scientists as well, and it is of growing concern. That's certainly the case.
And there is a follow-up question. Does the campaign incorporate AI literacy, helping citizens understand how generative tools work and how content can be manipulated?
I wouldn't say it goes into a very in-depth detail on that, since we cover quite a wide range of topics, and we're trying to go for trying to speak to let's say an audience that doesn't really have much background knowledge about this information integrity, but we do address AI, and in fact in our handbook on how to address climate disinformation, there is a part going on AI there, but I would I'd encourage the person who posted that to have a look and can let us know what they think.
Stephanie, I think that you could reply the next one. Given the rapid evolution of generative AI, do you believe platforms are moving fast enough to detect and label AI-generated climate content?
Short answer, no. They're not moving fast enough. I think they're also not interested in moving. I mean, I don't think they're being held to account to do so, and I don't think it's just climate content. I think the same is true of other content that is either false or damaging, harmful to viewers in some way. So yeah, I don't think we have any evidence. I do think that they are aware that they have a problem, and I think they're more worried about the fact that the general volume of the massive volume of AI content is making all information on the internet kind of useless, meaning that people are getting kind of sick of seeing so much nonsense on the internet. So it may sort of solve itself in that sense, in an optimistic way, meaning that, just going back to the question about what people can do about identifying AI-generated content on climate. The problem is that there are simple tricks. Obviously, many of those I'm sure in the campaign that the EU's mounted, which is seeing if you can reverse image search, seeing if you can see something strange about the issue. If it's too crazy to believe, it's probably not true. Those kinds of things still hold. But I think increasingly we're seeing that even with the best detective mechanisms, even if you spend hours trying to reverse engineer some of these images or videos or statements, it's not possible anymore. That they're becoming, strong enough, let's say. In that context, maybe an optimistic note is that I think it's possible to use I think it's the third pillar of the campaign, which is, I think you called it Be Informed, which is just finding out for yourself, getting out off the internet and just talking to someone, or looking in local initiatives in your area, or talking to someone going other routes, let's say, than social media, is actually a good technique, and perhaps one of the only ones that citizens will be left with if the companies don't do something. And unfortunately, I think, like I said, even not just climate, but other issues. One of the other projects that we work on at Tactical Tech is looking at the impact of technology on young people. And when you look at, for example, AI cartoons and things, they're not doing anything about that at all. So I don't see that happening yet, unfortunately.
AI cartoons, we need to talk about it. Super interesting. Now, I've seen there are a good amount of questions on narratives and techniques. I'd like you both to answer in a short way, if possible, so we have enough time to discuss about them. So let's go to Arena. Jeremy, how do you deal, the European Commission, with certain political parties aligning themselves with climate disinformation?
How do we deal with certain political parties aligning themselves with climate disinformation? I mean, in the context of this campaign, we aren't addressing any political party in particular. It's a campaign aimed at strengthening societal resilience, aimed at empowering European citizens to be able to deal with those things by themselves, and so that they can better have the tools to consume media in a critical way, in a more informed way. Beyond that, I would say it's not in our scope, in our mandate to address what political parties are doing in this scene.
Jerry, have you considered that the campaign could be weaponized by certain actors, political actors? Have you considered this scenario?
Yes, certainly. I mean, we have seen that in the past, when the EU and other member states, in fact, have spoken out and taken action to address disinformation, there's been a surge in trying to counter that. But well, we stand ready, I'd say, and we, this communication component is one side of it. On the other side, I'm talking specifically about climate disinformation today, but the European Commission also addresses disinformation on all sorts of topics, from both from a communication perspective and from a policy-making perspective as well.
Thank you. Do you have a word on this? Because I guess, Stephanie, that yeah, you've seen political parties aligning with climate disinformation many times along your career.
Yeah, I do think that there's a shorthand as well, right? I mean, we did a project just because you mentioned working on these issues for a long time. Many years ago, we did a project called Confessions of a Data Broker, and we were looking at the data brokering industry and how different companies and marketing agencies sell access to data or understanding of the public based on access to data to different kinds of political parties for targeting people. And in doing that research, we found that they are selling access to profiles which are either pro or anti-climate. So we know that there's a link even at the sort of targeting and political campaigning level to how people vote on climate. So it's intricately connected to politics at the root, I think, even for many years. Never mind now where it's very much on the front table as an issue. So now it's something that divides people immediately. You can tell if somebody's one side of this political spectrum or another based on their opinions on climate, according to many people. And the same goes for how politicians are, blocking policies or rolling back on policies, very much linked to political alliances. And they're no longer hiding this. I think it's very much a campaigning method even, to the point that it becomes what people call issue stacking. So, putting one set of issues on top of the other and then making that to be a kind of political profile in a way. So I think it's very much part of the political process. And that makes it very hard to solve because people take very quick decisions about it. And that's one of the reasons why companies obviously are struggling with communicating this environment. Companies who are trying to make progress on the issues, not just NGOs, but many other actors as well, who now find themselves in a bit of a political battle when they're just trying to get on with something that they care about and feel is important and needs doing.
Thank you. We have a question from Pablo Krivenko. Disinformation often spreads faster because it's emotional, simple, and identity-driven. Are fact-based campaigns enough, or does the EU need to rethink how it communicates climate policy in a more emotionally compelling way? That was the aim of the campaign, right, Jeremy?
Yes, thank you. Personally, I wouldn't oppose fact-based and compelling. So maybe I understand there's the difference between being, let's say, a boring campaign and an entertaining campaign, maybe. But maybe having facts and figures at the forefront can be perceived as not as engaging, so people won't be interested in it. But with this campaign, well, I would argue we have tried to make it engaging and compelling, and also not just in the material that we've created, but also in our collaborations with social media influencers, for instance, to whom we gave quite a lot of in the brief, invited them to be creative, which many of them I think were very much, and which helps, for instance, the Italian influencer I mentioned during my presentation, Elisa Altamura, who was using the example of gossip and how that spreads to try to explain climate disinformation and how to address it. But then also beyond this campaign, we communicate on a bunch of other issues regarding European climate action, and I'm sure we can certainly always do better. But I would say we would strive to be engaging while being rooted in facts.
Thank you, Jeremy. So we are running out of time, and I need to ask a question on regulatory intersection, just to give some context. Under the DSA, climate disinformation is not considered or is not explicitly defined as a systemic risk category. So this question, I guess, is about this possible regulatory gap. If climate disinformation continues to undermine EU climate policy, but it's not formally recognized as a systemic risk under the DSA, are we facing a structural blind spot in enforcement?
Yeah, I mean, short answer, no. I would say. I the way, so the DSA, the Digital Services Act, for those who don't know, under the DSA, there is the Code of Conduct on disinformation, which calls on companies or very large online platforms to take action to prevent a systemic spread of disinformation. But there is what you'd call a theme agnostic approach, in that this pertains to disinformation in general. It's not specifically climate disinformation or health disinformation or something else. And so in that sense, short answer, no.
Thank you.
Can I
Yeah.
know we're going to finish now, but just to say that there's two chapters in the RePlaybook on exactly this question. So if you want to know more about it, there's one actually by EU Disinfo Lab and another by the Forum of Information Democracy. So yeah, feel free to check them out if you want to explore that question in more detail from two different experts.
Thank you, Stephanie. So now there are still a couple excellent questions in Slido, but I'm sorry we cannot get all of them. Thank you so much for your active participation and thoughtful contributions. A big thank you to our audience for joining us today, for engaging. A heartfelt thanks to our wonderful speakers, Jeremy and Stephanie, and to my dear colleague Maria Brito behind the scenes running this webinar. And if you allow me, a special thank you to the European Commission, particularly to DG Clima, for dedicating time, energy, and resources to developing this campaign. For those like EU Disinfo Lab, myself personally working on climate disinformation, it's incredibly important to see institutional commitment to addressing these challenges in a structured and strategic way. Before we leave, I would kindly ask you for just 30 more seconds of your attention. When you close this webinar, you will see a short survey that will appear on your screen. If you could take a moment to fill it in, it really helps us improve the events and continue, delivering relevant and high-quality discussions for our community. And don't miss our upcoming webinars. Next Thursday, our own Katrina Luis Asame will dive into how to unlock more EU funding for 2028-2034 and what role we can play. This is interesting. And on the 26th February, Marilia Görke, sorry for that, from the University of Groningen will lead us through a critical discussion on gender disinformation, synthetic abuse, and political violence in the webinar Forced to Quit, definitely not to miss. And if you would like to better understand how the Digital Service Act, the one we've been talking about now, is being enforced in practice, stay tuned for our new EU Disinfo Lab webinar series that we have called Evidence and Enforcement. So stay tuned. We have many exciting conversations ahead, and we hope to see you again soon. Thank you again for joining us, and have a wonderful rest of the day. Bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks. Bye.
All right.